What memories rest behind the closed doors of Britain's quiet royal homes? And why do some estates seem to hold more silence than history itself allows us to see today? Welcome to Historic Docs Archive, a place for gentle reflection on the past. Share where you are listening from and consider subscribing as we begin this quiet journey together now. There are moments in history when a quiet question rises like mist across an old landscape, lingering just long enough to unsettle the edges of certainty. It is the kind of question that drifts through the corridors of time and pauses before locked doors, as though waiting for someone to notice it. Tonight, we follow one such question into the hidden world of royal houses, the places that have existed for centuries behind curtains of formality and silence. Before we begin, I want to thank you for joining me here on the Historic Docs Archive channel. Wherever you may be listening from, whether it is late evening, a quiet early morning, or a slow afternoon, feel free to share your location in the comments below. It is always comforting to see how far these stories travel. And if you would like to continue exploring history with us, I invite you to subscribe as we begin our slow journey into the private residences of the House of Windsor. Across the breadth of Britain, the royal family is often associated with the great public buildings that fill postcards, holiday broadcasts, and news reports. Buckingham Palace standing at the edge of the Mall, grand and ceremonial. Windsor Castle rising above the Thames Valley, its stone walls bearing nearly 1,000 years of narrative. Kensington Palace tucked beside its gardens, tied forever to the memory of earlier generations. These are the residences known to most people, the familiar landmarks that serve as symbols of monarchy. Yet behind the well-worn images is another landscape, one composed not of palaces made for public governance, but of private houses designed for withdrawal, reflection, and continuity. These properties, rarely seen and seldom discussed in detail, form a quieter thread through the royal family's story. They are the places where time stretches differently, where decisions are contemplated in silence, and where the weight of tradition is carried in the creaking of floors and the closing of old wooden doors. Our exploration begins with one of the most enduring of these private estates, a name that often appears only briefly in winter news footage, yet holds far more history than those few seconds would suggest: Sandringham. It stands in the gentle countryside of Norfolk, a region where winter has a soft gray light and where distant hedgerows mark the shape of fields stretching toward the sea. To the casual observer, Sandringham enters public consciousness only once a year, when the royal family is seen walking to church on Christmas morning. The images are familiar and reassuring: a quiet lane, spectators on either side, a small parish church, and the family moving calmly between the points of focus. What is not seen, however, lies far behind those brief scenes. Sandringham is not a single house, but a wide estate in which multiple buildings rest among gardens, woods, and farmland. For over a century and a half, it has been a winter refuge for monarchs, a place where routine continues in private, and where the pressures of public life momentarily reduce to manageable proportions. Such estates, often portrayed as retreats, are more than comfortable surroundings. They are repositories of continuity. Monarchs come and go, generations shift and evolve, but the rooms remain, the hallways endure, and the landscape around them serves as a steady reminder of lineage and responsibility. Before we step deeper into this estate, it is important to understand the role such properties play within the wider fabric of royal life. Public palaces function as the visible face of the monarchy. They host state visitors, ceremonial events, and national rituals. They are carefully maintained, staffed, and open to the public at set times of the year. Their history is documented, their architecture recorded, and their significance recognized by millions. Private estates, on the other hand, exist in a quieter realm. Their function is not ceremonial but personal. They are not designed for the gaze of crowds, but for the rhythm of daily life. These are the places where monarchs rise each morning without the expectation of cameras, where they read, walk, reflect, and continue the private routines that support the public responsibilities. Sandringham became part of royal history in the 19th century, and since then it has grown organically, shaped not by a single architectural vision, but by the needs and preferences of successive residents. Different wings bear the signs of different decades. Some rooms preserve Victorian detail, while others reflect later modifications. The estate is vast, extending across farmland, lawns, gardens, woodland patches, and small lakes. Its atmosphere changes with the seasons. In summer, the grounds carry a gentle warmth and the sound of distant activity. In autumn, the estate carries the scent of fallen leaves and early fog. Yet it is winter that defines Sandringham in the public imagination, even though very few ever glimpse its true scale. Imagine approaching this estate on a cold afternoon in late December. The sky hangs low over the Norfolk countryside, the air carrying a slight bite that hints at frost. Roads narrow as they draw near the property, curving gently between tree lines and old stone walls. On the horizon, the dark silhouette of the house comes into view, not imposing but quietly expansive, with wings and extensions that reveal its age and layered history. There is a sense that time slows here, that modern life pauses for a moment as one enters grounds where routine has settled into place across generations. The main house stands with a muted dignity, its many rooms arranged around courtyards and corridors. Light falls differently in older houses, shaping each interior in ways that reveal the passing of decades. In some rooms, tall windows bring in the soft glow of winter sun. In others, narrow hallways remain dim, even at midday, echoing the quiet footsteps of past occupants. The estate's smaller buildings, such as York Cottage and Park House, are set apart at varying distances, each carrying its own history and long-forgotten memory. Though many people know these names only through passing references, they form important parts of the estate's story. York Cottage once served as a family residence for early 20th century royals. Park House, more modest than the main house, holds a different kind of significance because of the life that began within its walls decades ago. Every building, each path that cuts across the estate, and each stand of trees has a place in the narrative, even though they are rarely discussed beyond the immediate royal circle. As evening draws near, Sandringham transforms. The temperature drops, and the breeze coming from the North Sea carries a sharper edge. A faint glow appears in one of the far windows, an indication that someone has entered a room to begin preparations for the evening. Outside, the lawns become still. Inside, the corridors remain quiet, their walls absorbing the passing of years. Far from the public eye, these quiet winter evenings have shaped the lives of monarchs for generations. It is in these secluded spaces that decisions have been considered, letters written, and moments of private reflection held. The atmosphere is neither grand nor dramatic. It is simply steady, familiar, and deeply tied to the rhythm of monarchy. For now, we leave the estate at this hour, with the sky darkening and a single window shining softly in the dusk. We will step inside soon, but for the moment, allow that distant glow to remain our last image. The distant glow from that window lingers in the mind for a moment, steady and warm against the cool expanse of the Norfolk evening. As we move closer, the light becomes a quiet invitation, guiding us deeper into Sandringham's private world. It is a subtle image, yet it carries the tone of this estate more faithfully than any public photograph ever could. Sandringham is not a place of spectacle. It is a place of stillness, routine, and lives lived at a gentle pace far from the ceremonial demands of London. Stepping toward that softened light, we begin to understand why generations have returned here, seeking not grandeur, but space to breathe beyond the public gaze. The approach to the house is lined with mature trees planted long before the current occupants were born. Their branches rise like archways, marking the path to a residence that has stood for over 160 years. The ground beneath them is often soft from seasonal rainfall, giving the estate a natural, almost rural intimacy. Sandringham is large, yet it has never sought to impress through imposing architecture. Instead, its character rests in the harmony between house and landscape, a balance maintained through careful stewardship. The lawns are expansive but unpretentious, gently sloping toward ornamental lakes that reflect the shifting winter sky. These open areas once supported countless gatherings, quiet walks, and family routines, though most of these moments remain known only to those who lived them. Inside, the house holds a timeless atmosphere, shaped by the rhythm of everyday life rather than ceremonial occasion. The entrance hall is modest when compared to the great official palaces. There are no towering gilded ceilings or echoing marble corridors here. Instead, the floors are polished wood, warmed by rugs that soften footsteps. The air has the gentle scent of older houses, a mix of polished surfaces, aged books, and the faint memory of evening fires. Portraits line several of the walls, their muted frames holding faces from eras that now seem distant. They are reminders of lineage, yet in this setting, they blend calmly into the background. As we continue through the corridors, the architecture becomes a subtle record of the estate's evolution. Some sections carry Victorian features, with darker paneling and narrow passages. Later additions introduce wider rooms, softer tones, and a slightly more modern comfort. The house does not present a single era but rather layers of time, each one absorbed into the next. It is this layering that gives Sandringham its unique atmosphere. In places where natural light filters through tall windows, the house feels open and welcoming. In others, where the hallways narrow and the ceilings lower, there is a sense of intimacy that speaks to generations seeking shelter from public scrutiny. Beyond the main corridors lie rooms that have served countless purposes across the decades. Some were reading rooms, favored for their quiet corners and gentle light in the late afternoon. Others served as informal gathering spaces, where family members met before dinner or paused during the day to read letters or discuss small matters. These rooms hold no grand narrative of state, yet they are significant in a quieter way. They shaped private life, offering routines and familiarity to people whose days in other settings were defined by schedule and formality. A deeper sense of history emerges as we move outward from the main residence. Scattered across the estate are smaller houses and cottages, each with a chapter of its own. York Cottage stands among them, a building once home to a future monarch during the early years of the 20th century. It is less formal than many would expect, with the feel of a large family home rather than a royal residence. The rooms inside once echoed with the sound of children, their daily life unfolding far from the ceremonial halls that later shaped their adult responsibilities. The cottage became known in part for its simplicity, an unusual quality among houses associated with royalty. It remains a reminder that even within the structure of monarchy, some lives were shaped in environments more modest and domestic than one might imagine. Not far away stands Park House, another important but understated building on the estate. Its history differs, connected not to monarchs but to other members of the extended family. The house carries a gentler architectural presence, with large windows that face the fields and an interior layout that speaks to the quieter routines of those who once grew up within its walls. While the public remembers Park House primarily because of the life that began there decades ago, the building itself existed long before that moment. Its rooms once held ordinary household activity, familiar patterns of family life, and the lingering warmth of Norfolk summers. The significance that history later assigned to it was not part of its original purpose. Instead, it grew gradually, the way meaning often accumulates in places where life unfolds in private. Taken together, these buildings form a constellation of memory across the Sandringham estate. They do not stand in tight formation, but are spaced apart by fields, gardens, and long driveways. This separation allows each structure to maintain its own identity, its own rhythm, and its own recollection of the past. At the same time, the estate functions as a single living landscape. Seasonal changes connect the buildings in subtle ways. When winter frost settles on the lawns, it blankets both the main house and the cottages. When spring brings new growth to the gardens, it reaches toward every corner of the property. This unity across the land has created a sense of continuity that transcends generations. Evening continues to settle around Sandringham, and we return once more to the quiet image that welcomed us here, a single window glowing gently in the darkening landscape. As the last traces of daylight fade, that glow remains steady, a small piece of warmth in a vast and quiet estate. Inside, someone has moved through one of the long corridors, their footsteps crossing polished floors in the calm rhythm of a house settling into night. The sound is soft and brief, but it carries far enough to suggest presence in an otherwise still building. We focus on those faint footsteps now, hearing them as they move gradually toward another part of the house. In a moment, the sound becomes the thread that leads us deeper into the story, suggesting not urgency, but continuity. The estate remains alive even in quiet hours, shaped not only by its history, but by the ongoing routines of those who pass through its hallways. As the footsteps fade, we let them guide us forward, toward the rooms and smaller residences where earlier generations once lived. Their paths will take us into the next part of our journey, where the quieter corners of Sandringham reveal the memories they continue to hold. The fading footsteps continue to echo softly through the quiet interior, moving through a corridor that has carried similar sounds for more than a century. Each step settles into the wooden boards with a familiarity that suggests the house itself has long grown accustomed to the rhythm of people passing through it. In older residences, footsteps possess a distinct tone, shaped by the age of the floors and the dimensions of the rooms they inhabit. Here at Sandringham, that tone is gentle, almost contemplative, as though the house has learned to absorb sound rather than amplify it. Following the memory of those footsteps, we drift further inward, toward the parts of the estate that lie beyond the main rooms and formal spaces. These lesser-known areas hold stories that rarely make their way into public conversation. They are modest in scale compared to the grand palaces associated with royal life, yet they possess a significance that rests not in architecture, but in the quiet personal histories that once unfolded within them. York Cottage is one such place. The building sits apart from the main house, reached by a simple path that winds between open lawns and stands of trees. Approaching it from a distance, one might mistake it for a comfortable country home rather than a residence tied to monarchy. Its scale is large but not imposing, marked by chimneys, gabled roofs, and a sense of domesticity that feels different from the formal presence of larger estates. York Cottage entered the royal story at the turn of the 20th century, a period marked by transition and shifting roles within the family. It served as the home of a future king during his early married life, long before he ascended the throne. Inside, the rooms reflect the tastes of that era. Some are simple and functional, shaped by the patterns of everyday living. Others carry decorative details that echo the preferences of the early 20th century, a period when tradition and modernity blended gently rather than clashing. These rooms saw family gatherings, the beginnings of routines, and the development of personal habits that would accompany their occupants through later stages of life. The cottage became a place of origin for experiences that influenced future decisions, even though its modest exterior might lead an observer to overlook such significance. The atmosphere of York Cottage remains grounded in a sense of personal space. It is a building that welcomes rather than impresses. Though no longer used as a primary residence, it continues to stand as a reminder of times when members of the family lived lives that were, in some respects, nearer to the experience of ordinary households than their later roles allowed. Visitors today might see only a quiet structure surrounded by greenery, yet within its walls linger traces of laughter, conversations, and private moments that shape the young lives of those once destined for public duty. Not far from York Cottage lies another building with a quieter but equally enduring history, Park House. It sits along the edge of the estate, facing open fields that stretch toward the horizon. The house carries a feeling of openness, its windows gathering the shifting light of Norfolk mornings and afternoons. Before it became known for the birth of someone whose life would later enter global awareness, Park House hosted a more ordinary pattern of living. Families settled here, carried out their routines, and shaped a domestic world that felt far removed from the formal structures of monarchy. Children played across the grounds, meals were shared in comfortable rooms, and the natural rhythm of rural life marked the passing of seasons. Park House gained broader attention only decades later, when the life of a young girl who grew up within its rooms took a path that would forever connect her name to the royal family. Yet the house had existed long before that moment, its history richer and deeper than any single chapter. Its architecture reflects the character of the early 20th century, with proportions that balance practicality and comfort. Inside, the corridors are wide enough to allow natural light to flow, yet narrow enough to preserve a feeling of intimacy. Bedrooms overlook the fields, their windows framed by soft light that shifts gently throughout the day. These rooms once held the dreams and worries of a family living without the constant presence of public attention. Their quiet simplicity remains one of the house's defining features. Together, York Cottage and Park House form an important part of the Sandringham story. They remind us that estates such as this one are not merely large houses preserved for ceremonial use, but living environments shaped by diverse patterns of life. Some areas hosted monarchs during periods of reflection. Others welcomed young families through the rhythms of childhood and early adulthood. Still others stood ready for guests or served as working spaces, supporting the estate's daily function. All these elements blend seamlessly to form a landscape where personal history and national identity intertwine. The grounds between the buildings contribute greatly to the estate's atmosphere. Walking along the paths that connect them, one senses the understated beauty of Norfolk's terrain. The land rolls gently, never rising sharply or dropping suddenly. Trees line the edges of fields, offering shelter to wildlife and shade during the warmer months. Small ponds reflect the sky in muted tones, their surfaces disturbed only by the occasional breeze. Even in winter, when the air carries a quiet chill, the estate retains a sense of life. The earth rests but does not sleep entirely. There is always some sign of motion, a bird lifting from a branch, a cloud drifting across the horizon, leaves shifting softly in the wind. Inside the houses, the passage of time is reflected in small details. Worn steps bear the imprint of decades of movement. Doorways remember the touch of countless hands. Rooms hold warmth differently depending on their age and design. These elements give older estates their characteristic atmosphere. They become not only structures, but repositories of human experience. Sandringham's cottages and houses carry this quality strongly, each one preserving moments that contributed to the broader narrative of the family who lived here. As night begins to deepen over the estate, the quiet found earlier in the main house extends to these outlying residences as well. Windows dim, fields grow still, and the pathways fall into silence. For a moment, everything seems to rest, as though the estate is taking a long, steady breath after generations of hosting lives large and small. Yet even in this quiet, something lingers. A door within one of the older rooms closes gently, not with force, but with the soft finality of someone leaving for the night. The sound is brief, yet it carries far enough to become the closing note of this part of our journey. That simple movement, the quiet closing of a door, connects past and present in a way that words alone cannot fully express. We will follow that moment now, letting the stillness that follows guide us to our next chapter, where another estate awaits among the cool highland air and early morning mist. The quiet closing of the door lingers in the air like the final note of a familiar melody, fading slowly until only stillness remains. It is a stillness shaped not by emptiness, but by the gentle pause of a house settling into night. For a moment, the entire estate seems to breathe in unison, holding on to the last traces of movement before darkness fully settles. And as we stand in that calm silence, the mind begins to drift northward, toward a different landscape where quiet carries a deeper, more ancient tone. Beyond the soft contours of Norfolk fields lies the rugged expanse of the Scottish Highlands, where another royal residence stands among mountains, forests, and cold rivers. Balmoral. The transition from Sandringham to Balmoral is not merely a shift in geography, but a shift in atmosphere. Norfolk offers a gentle rural calm, shaped by low horizons and soft coastal air. Scotland, by contrast, introduces a landscape defined by space, depth, and an ancient solitude that reaches far beyond the lifespan of any single estate. The stillness we carry with us from Sandringham becomes something heavier as it meets the Highland air, something shaped by the weight of stone, the persistence of wind, and the long memory of the land itself. Approaching Balmoral for the first time, one is struck not by the silhouette of the castle, but by the environment surrounding it. The Highland hills rise sharply, their slopes marked by patches of heather and rocky outcrops that catch the light in muted shades. Forests stretch across wide valleys, their pines standing with quiet resolve against the changing seasons. The River Dee flows steadily near the estate, carrying with it the cooling presence of mountain water. In winter, mist lingers over the river in slow ribbons, drifting across the grounds like a pale veil before dissolving in the morning light. In summer, the air carries the scent of warm pine and distant rain. It is a landscape that encourages reflection, not speed. Balmoral entered the royal narrative during the 19th century, at a moment when Queen Victoria sought a place where she and Prince Albert could step away from public life. Their search led them deep into Scotland, where the Highlands offered a form of solitude unlike anything found in the southern counties. Balmoral's early structures were modest, but Victoria and Albert soon envisioned a residence that harmonized with the rugged beauty of the region. They commissioned a new castle, designed in a style that drew upon Scottish baronial traditions. Over time, this structure became the heart of the estate, standing with a confidence that mirrored the land around it. The castle's granite exterior reflects the color and texture of the mountains, giving it a grounded presence that feels inseparable from its surroundings. Turrets and gables rise with understated strength, their forms softened by centuries of Highland weather. Inside, Balmoral does not aim for the ceremonial grandeur found in state residences. Instead, it presents a comfortable, lived-in quality shaped by generations, using it as a retreat. Rooms are warm and wood-paneled. Fireplaces form natural gathering places. Windows frame views that shift constantly with the weather. Sunlight breaking through clouds, rain tracing paths down the glass, or mist settling across the grounds. For Victoria and Albert, Balmoral became not just a place of rest, but a place of renewal. Here, distant from London's formalities, they found the freedom to explore, walk, and reflect. Their affection for the Highlands infused the estate with a personal significance that later generations continued to honor. When monarchs arrived at Balmoral, they did so not simply to escape the demands of public life, but to reconnect with a landscape that had anchored royal family life for more than a century. In the decades that followed, Balmoral became woven into the seasonal rhythm of the monarchy. Late summer and early autumn were traditionally spent here, with each generation creating new routines while honoring the patterns established long before. Daily life at the estate unfolded quietly. Walks along the river, rides through the forests, afternoons spent reading in rooms where the only sound was the steady crackle of fire. Balmoral served as both sanctuary and stage for private life, a place where monarchs could think without interruption and where family members could gather without ceremony. The estate's vast acreage contributes to this sense of separation. At more than 50,000 acres, Balmoral is not simply a castle, but a landscape unto itself. The grounds include moorland, farmland, forest, and waterways, each part supporting the estate's self-contained rhythm. Caretakers, gamekeepers, gardeners, and foresters all contribute to the steady upkeep required by such a place. Their work ensures that the fields remain tended, paths remain passable, and the environment remains harmonious with long-standing traditions. Yet despite the scale of the estate, most of Balmoral remains unseen by the public. Limited seasonal access is granted to certain areas, such as the ballroom and gardens, but the castle and private grounds remain closed. This privacy is not intended to exclude, but to preserve the atmosphere that has defined the estate for generations. Balmoral is, above all, a retreat. Its value lies in the quiet its landscape provides, not in the grandeur it displays. Evening at Balmoral carries a special tone, one that blends the cool air of the Highlands with the lingering warmth of fires inside the castle. As the sun lowers behind the mountains, shadows stretch across the grounds, and the colors of the land deepen into muted blues and grays. Wildlife becomes more active in these hours. Deer move cautiously through the forests, birds settle into branches above the river. The soundscape shifts from daytime rustle to nighttime calm, and then morning comes. It is here, in the early hours of the day, that Balmoral reveals one of its most defining sights. As light begins to rise, the mists of the Highlands gather over the River Dee and the surrounding valleys. They move slowly, as though weighing the decision to lift or linger. These mists carry a sense of the land's ancient quiet, a reminder that this region held its own history long before the estate existed. When the mist rises, it reveals the castle in soft focus, its stone walls blending momentarily with the drifting clouds before standing clear against the morning sky. We will pause at that image now. The early morning mist rising from the river, gathering around the grounds before folding gently into the light. It is a moment that captures Balmoral's essence, solitude, continuity, and quiet reflection carried through the changing seasons. Let us step into that mist as we move forward, allowing it to guide us deeper into the estate's evolving story in the next part of our journey. The early morning mist rises from the River Dee in a long, unbroken breath, drifting across the valley with a lightness that almost disguises the weight of history held within this land. As the first touches of daylight filter through the haze, the entire estate seems to emerge slowly, as though waking from a deep, unhurried sleep. The castle, still half-veiled, reveals sections of stone and shadow before fading again behind shifting trails of vapor. The air is cool, still carrying the chill of night, yet there is a softness in this early hour that sets the tone for Balmoral's quiet rhythm. It is a rhythm shaped not by ceremony or urgency, but by the steady passing of days that repeat each year with reassuring familiarity. Within this evolving light, the estate begins its day. Paths that disappeared into mist only moments before now stretch out clearly, bordered by heather, grass, and clusters of trees that line the grounds. The mountains beyond the river become distinct, their slopes emerging in shades of green, brown, and muted purple. The sound of flowing water grows clearer as the mist thins, and the call of distant birds echoes across the valley. It is a peaceful awakening, one that speaks to why Balmoral has held such significance for generations of the royal family. Here, far from London's intensity, each day begins not with a crowd or a schedule, but with the quiet reassurance of landscape. During the 20th century, Balmoral's role in royal life continued to deepen. Successive monarchs made it a summer refuge, a place where the demands of public life momentarily loosened and where private routines could unfold without constant scrutiny. Queen Elizabeth II, in particular, developed a connection to Balmoral that lasted throughout her life. For her, the estate was not simply a property or a seasonal residence. It was a personal sanctuary, somewhere she could ride, walk, read, and reflect with a sense of freedom that few other places could offer. Those who visited during her stays often remarked on the steady, grounded atmosphere she maintained in these months, an atmosphere shaped partly by the natural setting and partly by the long-held family traditions tied to this estate. The structure of daily life at Balmoral is simple by design. Mornings often begin with outdoor activity, shaped by the weather and the season. The grounds stretch far enough to allow long walks without encountering large groups of people. Woodland paths extend deep into the forests, providing a sense of privacy even within a vast landscape. Along these trails, the scent of pine fills the air, and the sound of branches shifting in the wind accompanies each step. These walks connect the various parts of the estate, from the main castle to smaller lodges and cottages scattered throughout the grounds. Afternoons at Balmoral often take place indoors, especially when the weather turns cool or rain begins to sweep across the valley. Within the castle, the rooms remain warm and comfortable, shaped by generations of use. The decor reflects the tastes of earlier monarchs, yet the spaces themselves feel lived in rather than preserved. Fireplaces, often lit during the colder months, add a gentle warmth to the wood-paneled interiors. Bookshelves line many of the walls, holding volumes collected over decades. Small details, photographs on shelves, worn rugs bearing the subtle marks of repeated footsteps, contribute to the sense that Balmoral is as much a home as it is a historical site. The afternoons might also include work, for even in retreat, the responsibilities of monarchy do not fully pause. However, the setting softens the tone of these tasks. Papers reviewed in a quiet room overlooking the river carry a different weight than those reviewed in a London office. Conversations held by the warmth of a fire take on a steadier, more reflective character. The estate offers space not only for rest, but for thought, a quality that has contributed to many decisions made within these walls. As daylight begins to fade, Balmoral moves into a different rhythm. The temperature drops, and the air carries a sharper coolness that hints at the coming evening. The river darkens, its surface reflecting the deepening colors of the sky. The hills, once clearly visible in the morning light, become silhouettes once more. Indoor lights begin to glow, illuminating windows that had appeared empty only moments before. These soft lights scattered across the estate mark the transition from day to night. Night at Balmoral brings a stillness distinct from daytime quiet. The estate is large, yet it becomes hushed in these hours, as if the land itself withdraws into a peaceful rest. Only the faintest sounds continue, the gentle rustle of branches, the distant call of wildlife, or the steady flow of the river. Within the castle, the crackle of fireplaces becomes more pronounced. Outside, the darkness gathers across the fields and forests, sheltering the estate in its familiar solitude. It is usually during these twilight hours that one sees the caretakers who help maintain the estate's rhythm. Their presence is not intrusive, but essential, forming the silent backbone of daily life at Balmoral. As the sky darkens fully, one caretaker walks toward one of the estate's gates, checking the grounds as part of the nightly routine. His steps are deliberate, steady, carrying the calm familiarity of someone who has walked this path many times before. The gate stands tall and weathered, its metal darkened by the highland's persistent seasons. With practiced ease, he secures it for the night, ensuring the estate rests as it always has, quiet, sheltered, and removed from the world beyond. The sound of the gate closing carries across the still evening air, providing a gentle final note to the day's unfolding. There is no urgency in the movement, no sense of ceremony. It is simply the careful act of maintaining continuity, of preserving the quiet that defines Balmoral in every season. Once the lock is secured, the caretaker steps back briefly, taking in the landscape that has grown nearly invisible in the deepening night. The moonlight touches the tops of the trees, outlining them in faint silver, while the castle itself recedes behind the soft glow of its windows. We will pause here, holding on to this image of the lone caretaker, securing the gate as night settles over the estate. It is a simple moment, yet it captures the essence of this place, its solitude, its steadiness, and its quiet presence in the lives of those who have called it home. The sound of the gate settling into its lock fades gently into the Highland night, leaving behind a quiet that stretches across the grounds like a protective blanket. For a moment, Balmoral stands completely still, its castle outlined by faint glimmers of interior light and the soft reflection of moonlit mist that lingers along the riverbank. The caretaker walks away with the steady, unhurried steps of someone who knows these paths intimately, someone who understands that the estate keeps its own time, independent of the pace of the world beyond its borders. His silhouette dissolves into the darkness as he returns toward one of the smaller lodges, and the castle once again becomes almost a part of the landscape itself, resting under the weight of centuries. As night deepens, the castle's turrets disappear into the sky, merging with the shadows of the surrounding hills. Balmoral, in this hour, becomes less a residence and more a memory, one shaped by long summers, quiet decisions, and the gentle continuity of private life. Yet as we turn away from the estate and begin to move southward, the closing of that gate echoes faintly behind us, guiding us along a path that leads not into another sanctuary, but toward a residence touched by a different kind of history. If Balmoral represents retreat and reflection, the next estate in our journey represents the opposite, the weight of a turning point that changed the course of the monarchy itself. Several hundred miles away, beyond Windsor's familiar grounds and deep within the quiet folds of Windsor Great Park, sits a building that rarely appears in public discussion, Fort Belvedere. To reach it, one follows a long, winding road that passes through wooded areas, open glades, and fields that have remained largely unchanged for generations. The closer one moves toward the fort, the quieter the surroundings become, as though the landscape is subtly preparing visitors for the story embedded within its walls. Unlike the warmth of Sandringham or the expansive solitude of Balmoral, Fort Belvedere carries a different tone, a tone shaped by the legacy of a national crisis. Built in the mid-18th century as a whimsical Gothic revival structure, the fort originally had no grand purpose. It functioned as a decorative folly, a charming architectural feature designed to enhance the aesthetic character of the park. The structure's crenellated walls, triangular tower, and elevated position on the landscape were intended for picturesque effect rather than defense. Yet despite its fanciful origins, the fort gradually became more than an ornament. Its secluded position, perched on a rise that allowed views across stretches of the surrounding estate, quietly invited moments of solitude. It was here, far from the public world, that various members of the royal family occasionally found refuge in private hours. In the 1920s and early 1930s, Fort Belvedere developed a new identity when it became the residence of the then Prince of Wales, later King Edward VIII. During these years, the fort shifted from an ornamental feature into a home marked by the tastes and lifestyle of a future monarch. Rooms were adapted, gardens tended, and the once purely decorative structure began to echo with daily footsteps. Parties, gatherings, and private conversations unfolded within its walls. The estate provided privacy and distance, a place where visitors arrived discreetly and where the prince could live a life partially removed from the expectations placed upon him. Yet this period, filled with personal activity and growing independence, ultimately led to one of the most significant constitutional moments of the 20th century. It was in the quiet rooms of Fort Belvedere that Edward VIII signed the document that would alter the course of the monarchy. On a December day in 1936, within these very walls, the abdication became official. The setting was unassuming, a private residence away from formal palaces, yet the weight of the event reverberated across Britain and the world. Newspapers chronicled the moment with gravity, and the image of the king who chose love over the crown became forever linked to this building. After Edward's departure from royal life, the fort fell into a deep stillness. For nearly 2 decades, the residence remained empty, its rooms unoccupied, and its corridors absent of routine. Houses, even grand ones, sensed the absence of daily life. Without footsteps, without the opening and closing of doors, without the subtle warmth created by human presence, buildings settle into a unique kind of quiet, one that reflects not peace, but pause. Fort Belvedere entered a long pause, its identity preserved yet suspended, its significance known yet rarely spoken aloud. Eventually, in the mid-20th century, the fort was leased privately to new occupants, marking the beginning of a quieter chapter in which the building continued to exist within Windsor Great Park, but withdrew almost entirely from public awareness. Today, it remains a residence under private lease, surrounded by trees and shielded from view. Its story seldom appears in official narratives. There are no guided tours, no seasonal openings, and no accessible rooms where visitors might observe the space where history shifted so dramatically. Fort Belvedere has become a place where the past resides in silence, carried not by public display, but by the walls themselves. As we approach the structure in this moment of reflection, the air around it grows colder. Winter winds drift through the park, moving through the branches of the surrounding trees and carrying a sharpness that hints at the season's arrival. The fort stands with its distinctive architectural outlines still intact, its crenellations catching the faint light of an overcast sky. Though the building remains lived in, it retains an atmosphere shaped by the quiet decades it endured and by the memory of the act that occurred within its rooms. We look upward toward the tower, where a narrow window stands slightly ajar to the winter air. Though no sound emerges, the movement of cold wind through the opening is visible in the soft flutter of a curtain within. That small motion carries a subtle reminder of the weight this building holds, the sense that history, even when silent, continues to move gently through the structures where it once unfolded. Allow that moment to settle for a time, the cold draft of winter air passing through an empty tower window, brushing against the stillness inside. It becomes our transition point, guiding us toward the next chapter in this journey through the quiet residences of the royal past. The winter draft slips through the narrow tower window of Fort Belvedere, carrying with it a faint whisper of the cold that settles over Windsor Great Park at this time of year. Inside, the thin movement of air drifts across the stillness of the room with almost deliberate calm, stirring a fold of curtain before disappearing into silence once more. It is a quiet reminder that even in buildings that have witnessed defining moments, moments that reshape nations and alter the course of families, there are long stretches of time when nothing happens at all. The walls simply breathe with the season, waiting for another footstep or conversation to fill the rooms again. Yet here, at this particular estate, the pause is heavier than most. It carries the weight of memory and the understanding that history sometimes demands stillness after great upheaval. Leaving Fort Belvedere behind, we move gently across Windsor Great Park, following the landscape as it shifts from wooded ridges to open clearings and then toward the softer terrain closer to the castle grounds. The park is vast, a living world of its own, shaped by centuries of care and quiet use. Deer move through the undergrowth, appearing briefly between trees before vanishing again into the mottled patterns of winter bark. Paths wind through areas so natural that they seem untouched, yet every turn carries a sense of intention, each one shaped long ago for the comfort of those who sought privacy within these borders. As we continue our slow approach, the park begins to reveal other residences, smaller, quieter homes that hold their own stories within the royal landscape. Some are cottages used by staff and long-serving members of the household. Others are modest houses built for specific purposes in earlier decades. Among these structures is a residence that, unlike Fort Belvedere, has not been shaped by the gravity of constitutional crisis, but rather by the complexities of more recent times. Frogmore Cottage, situated near the larger Frogmore House and the serene resting place of numerous members of the royal family, has experienced a quieter history for much of its existence. Yet in the past few years, it has stepped unexpectedly into global attention. Despite its small size and humble architectural character, Frogmore Cottage began as a modest building in the early 19th century, part of a collection of structures used to support the larger Frogmore estate. The house itself is set back from public view, surrounded by gardens, trees, and stretches of grassland that create a peaceful, almost pastoral atmosphere. The cottage does not seek to impress. Its proportions are gentle. Its rooms, though comfortable, are not grand. The building was expanded over time, divided into separate units during certain periods, and used primarily as accommodation for staff working within the wider Windsor estate. For many years, its significance lay not in its architecture, but in its function, a practical residence that contributed modestly yet steadily to the daily workings of the royal household. Yet history often transforms places not through the design of architects or the intentions of planners, but through the lives of those who pass through them. In the early 21st century, Frogmore Cottage became the temporary home of a young family whose roles, challenges, and public scrutiny transformed the cottage from a quiet estate house into a focal point of modern conversation. Before this period, few outside royal circles knew of its existence. It was one of many structures on the Windsor estate, appreciated for its tranquility but seldom discussed beyond its immediate purpose. When extensive renovations were carried out to restore the cottage from its divided state into a single-family home, the work was practical, necessary to make the residence suitable for long-term occupancy. The interior was strengthened, systems modernized, and rooms reconnected. These changes were not unusual for an older house adapted to new use. Similar work has been carried out on numerous properties over the years. Yet the timing, the occupants, and the broader conversations surrounding public and private life brought attention to Frogmore Cottage that few could have anticipated. During the brief period it served as a home, the cottage witnessed small personal moments that rarely enter public record. The quiet routines of early parenthood, evenings spent in the soft light of its modest rooms, walks along the private lanes that wind through the estate. These moments remain unseen, held entirely within the walls of the house and the memories of those who lived there. And as quickly as this chapter began, it shifted again. The family moved abroad, and the cottage stood empty for a time before its occupancy changed once more. Yet despite the attention brought to it in recent years, Frogmore Cottage has returned to the quieter rhythm that defined much of its life. Its rooms, once the subject of public speculation, have resumed the calm of private use. The gardens around it remain peaceful, carrying the gentle ambiance long associated with the Frogmore area. The cottage does not boast dramatic history or architectural innovation. It remains what it has always been, a modest residence within a large and layered estate, shaped not by ceremony but by the ordinary patterns of domestic life. As we stand before it now in the early evening, the cottage appears still, set against the soft glow of Windsor's twilight. Most of its windows are dark, blending into the quietness of the surrounding grounds. Yet from one of the rooms near the center of the building, a single lamp remains lit. The warm circle of light falls softly against the window pane, casting a gentle reflection onto the grounds outside. It is not the sort of light that signals activity or event. Rather, it appears as if someone has stepped away briefly, leaving a lamp to warm the room as night begins to fall. The light is steady, uncomplicated, and speaks to the essence of Frogmore Cottage more clearly than any recounting of its recent history. This is a place meant for calm, a place meant for rest, a place that reveals itself not through dramatic moments, but through the quiet glow of a lamp left on at the end of the day. We will pause with that image now, the soft circle of light suspended within a small window, surrounded by the deepening dusk of the Windsor landscape. It serves as our transition, guiding us gently toward the next chapter in this exploration of the private residences that shape the quieter side of royal life. The soft circle of light shining from Frogmore Cottage lingers gently against the darkened grounds, creating a small island of warmth in the quiet of the evening. It glows steadily, neither bright nor dim, as though unaware of the attention it draws. Around it, the surrounding windows remain dark, blending into the familiar stillness of the grounds. The lamp's glow does not signal movement or urgency. It is the kind of light left on simply to keep a room from feeling cold. Standing before it, one cannot help but reflect on how such a simple, domestic detail can carry the weight of a much larger story. Across the expanse of Windsor Great Park, the night deepens. The trees near the cottage sway slightly under the touch of a mild wind, their branches moving in quiet arcs above the frost-covered grass. Somewhere in the distance, the low call of an owl echoes briefly before the silence folds over it again. Frogmore Cottage remains peacefully illuminated from within, the light gathering at the glass and spilling softly outward. And as we take one last slow look at that glow, we turn toward another royal residence, one far to the north and shaped by a different rhythm, yet connected by the same thread of quiet domestic life. The landscape shifts gradually as we leave Windsor behind. We follow fields, towns, and roads that stretch across the breadth of England, moving toward the wide rural expanses of Norfolk. Here the land opens into long stretches of farmland, villages, and coastal air that carries with it a gentle saltiness. Norfolk possesses a stillness that differs from the controlled quiet of royal estates. Its silence is shaped by open sky, distant horizons, and the low hum of countryside life. Within this softer landscape lies another residence that speaks to the modern generation of the royal family, Anmer Hall. Approaching Anmer Hall, one is struck not by grandeur, but by an understated confidence shaped by Georgian design elements. The house stands with clean, symmetrical lines, its brickwork softened by years of weather and light. The grounds surrounding it are spacious, yet not ostentatious, blending naturally into the rural setting rather than dominating it. Tall trees line parts of the property, creating a sense of privacy that feels less imposed and more organic. The house appears comfortable, quietly dignified, and suited to a young family seeking refuge from the constant rhythm of public life. Anmer Hall entered the modern royal narrative when it became the country residence of the then Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Though the property had its own history long before their arrival, the years following their marriage reshaped it into a home layered with the routines of early family life. Renovations were necessary to restore the house for long-term use, and though the details were not widely shared, the intention was clear: to create a comfortable, functional space away from the formality of London residences. Within these walls, the pattern of daily life unfolded at a gentler pace than the one seen in the capital. Early mornings in Norfolk often begin with soft light creeping across the fields, slowly illuminating the house. The sound of wind moving through the tall grasses and hedges forms the natural backdrop of the day. Inside, rooms fill gradually with warmth as fires are lit, and the house comes to life. The pace is deliberate, shaped by family routines that echo the experiences of many households across the country, though accompanied quietly by the duties and responsibilities of public life. Anmer Hall provided a balance that proved valuable during the years when young children filled the household. The grounds offer space to wander without intrusion, allowing for moments that are inherently private, even within the sphere of public responsibility. The estate's setting in Sandringham's wider landscape connects it to centuries of tradition, while allowing the daily rhythm to remain grounded in the present. In summer, the sunlight rests gently on the gardens. In winter, the coastal winds bring a crispness that settles across the fields. Inside the house, rooms were designed to be lived in rather than displayed. The interiors carry the quiet personality of a family home, shaped by comfort and functionality rather than ceremonial expectation. Kitchens, sitting rooms, and bedrooms reflect the simple routines of early parenthood. There are no public tours here, no formal reception halls prepared for large gatherings. The house's purpose is domestic, not symbolic. And perhaps for that reason, its significance lies not in its grandeur, but in its ability to remain a place of calm. Norfolk evenings carry a particular stillness, one that settles over Anmer Hall as the sun lowers beyond the fields. The sky often takes on muted colors, faded gold, pale lavender, or soft gray, before darkening completely. The sounds of the countryside shift as well. Birds settle into quiet patterns, and distant farm machinery concludes its work for the day. The interior lights of Anmer Hall glow gently against the encroaching twilight, creating a comforting sense of continuity. During these hours, the house stands not as a royal residence, but as a home where the simplicity of nightfall is allowed to unfold without ceremony. When visitors approach the estate after dusk, the warm lights inside appear as familiar markers of family life. They signal nothing extraordinary, only the rhythm of an evening meal, a conversation shared, or the settling of the house into its nighttime quiet. It is in this context, walking along one of the gravel paths leading from a nearby lane, that one becomes aware of a faint echo. It is the sound of footsteps, steady, measured, and softened by the gravel beneath. The footsteps do not hurry. They simply move with the natural pace of someone returning home as twilight deepens. The sound grows slightly clearer as the figure approaches the house, then fades again when the steps reach the grass that borders the gravel. This sound, gentle, unintrusive, serves as a reminder that even in the residences of monarchy, daily life is composed of such small, ordinary moments. A path, a pair of steps, a return. These details form the quiet heartbeat of estates like Anmer Hall, separate from the ceremonial duties associated with the family, but essential to their everyday existence. We pause on that sound now, the faint echo of footsteps along the gravel path, steady and unhurried as they move toward the house. This becomes our transition, guiding us softly toward the next residence and the next chapter in our journey through the lesser-seen homes of the royal world. The faint echo of footsteps along the gravel path lingers in the cool Norfolk air long after the figure has disappeared into the warm light of Anmer Hall. For a moment the night holds still, absorbing the last scattered sounds of movement before settling into a deep, familiar quiet. Gravel shifts softly back into place, the rhythmic crunch fading as naturally as breath. Across the fields, the wind moves through hedgerows with a low, steady whisper, carrying the distant scent of damp earth and the faint saltiness that drifts inland from the coast. The house stands at ease in this calm, a family home resting under the protective darkness of the countryside. As we leave the path behind, the sound of those footsteps continues to echo gently in memory, guiding us southward once more. Norfolk's wide fields give way to stretches of farmland that roll across England's interior. Villages appear briefly, lit by warm windows clustered around quiet squares, then fade again as the road continues toward Gloucestershire. The landscape here becomes softer, more undulating, shaped by meadows, orchards, and long-established lanes bordered by stone walls. The air carries the scent of pasture land and old gardens, a blend of earth and greenery that has settled into the region over centuries of cultivation. It is within this gentler landscape that we arrive at Highgrove House, a residence that reflects not only personal retreat, but decades of careful stewardship. Unlike the distant seclusion of Balmoral or the modest charm of Anmer Hall, Highgrove carries the visible mark of its occupants' long-term vision, a home shaped intentionally over time, woven into the land with steady, thoughtful care. Approaching Highgrove, the first impression is not the house itself, but the landscape surrounding it. The grounds are designed with an understanding of environmental rhythm, their structure shaped by principles of harmony and sustainability. Hedgerows have been restored, wildflower meadows cultivated, and gardens arranged not only for decorative beauty, but to support wildlife and ecological balance. Paths weave through orchards, alongside ponds, and between carefully tended beds, where plants grow in diverse and natural patterns. These gardens, recognized for their ecological focus, form the living heart of the property. The house stands modestly within this landscape, a Georgian structure with pale walls and restrained elegance. Its proportions are symmetrical, its form straightforward, allowing the surrounding land to speak first. Highgrove is less a statement of architectural status and more a home built into the continuity of its grounds. Yet the house's presence is unmistakably steady, its facade reflecting decades of careful preservation and quiet refinement. Inside, Highgrove's rooms carry an atmosphere shaped by long occupation. The interiors reflect a balance between formality and comfort, where antiques coexist with well-worn fabrics and personal collections sit alongside traditional furnishings. The rooms feel lived in, arranged not for display but for daily use. Bookshelves are filled with volumes that speak to long-standing interests: history, horticulture, philosophy, and architecture. Several rooms look out onto sections of the garden, creating a dialogue between interior spaces and the evolving landscape just beyond the windows. What distinguishes Highgrove from other royal residences is the clear imprint of personal involvement. Over the years, choices made across the estate, plantings, restorations, environmental practices, have been guided by long-term vision rather than short-term need. Each garden room tells a story: the wildflower meadow that blooms into vibrant life each summer, the stumpery with its dramatic arrangement of upturned roots and ferns, the kitchen garden where vegetables and herbs grow in quiet abundance. These spaces demonstrate that Highgrove is not merely a residence, but a cultivated environment where daily life and landscape intertwine. The atmosphere shifts with the seasons. In spring, blossoms emerge across the orchards, filling the air with scent and soft color. Summer brings a fullness of growth, where the gardens appear almost to spill over with life. Autumn introduces a transformation in tone, with golden light settling across the grounds and leaves shifting into deep amber and russet hues. Winter brings a quieter beauty, bare branches silhouetted against the sky, frost outlining the shapes of plants, and the land resting beneath a muted palette. As evening falls over Gloucestershire, Highgrove settles into its characteristic calm. Light glows softly through the windows, reflecting on pathways and stone walls. The gardens, so full of life during the day, become subdued, their colors fading into the dusk. Owls call from distant branches. The air cools, carrying the scent of wood smoke from nearby hearths. Within the house, lamps illuminate rooms where the day slowly turns toward night, and conversations shift into quieter tones. Visitors approaching the property after dusk often note a particular feeling that Highgrove imparts, a sense of continuity formed by the long partnership between house and land. The paths, though carefully tended, still carry the natural irregularities of rural life. The hedges, though shaped, remain alive with small movements of wildlife. Even the stillness feels organic, a pause in the natural cycle rather than an interruption. As we linger near one of the smaller gates leading into the outer sections of the gardens, a subtle sound breaks the silence. The wooden gate, old and weathered from many seasons, shifts slightly on its hinges. A breeze moves through, gentle yet firm enough to push the gate partly open. The wood creaks softly, a long, familiar sound that echoes the age of the estate. It is not abrupt or startling, but part of the natural voice of Highgrove, a reminder that even in moments of stillness, the land continues to move. We pause with that image now, the soft creak of the old wooden gate swinging open under the touch of evening air. It is a quiet moment, small and unassuming, yet it captures the essence of Highgrove's character, an estate shaped by care, stewardship, and the gentle movement of the natural world. Let that sound linger as we step toward the next chapter, guided once more by the landscape and the quiet spaces that define these royal homes. The old wooden gate at Highgrove swings open with a soft, drawn-out creak, its hinges speaking in the low, familiar tones of weathered iron and long service. As the breeze moves on, the gate settles gently back into place, its movement slowing until it rests once more against the post. For a moment, nothing else stirs. The gardens fall back into their evening stillness, the late light brushing across the meadow and the outlines of the house like a soft hand. Highgrove, surrounded by its living landscape, exhales the final hours of daylight with a calm that seems to seep into the air itself. Leaving that quiet behind, we turn north again, following the curve of the land as England gives way to the ridges and hills of the Scottish borders. Roads narrow as they rise toward the Highlands, and the atmosphere begins to shift. The air cools, the light changes, and the colors of the land deepen into the familiar tones of heather, pine, and river water, touched by the softness of northern dusk. By the time the hills open outward again, we find ourselves nearing another royal residence, one far more hidden, more private, and more deeply intertwined with the personal lives of those who have lived within its walls. Birkhall. Situated on the Balmoral estate, yet separate from the castle's grand presence, Birkhall stands quietly near the River Muick, surrounded by slopes and forests that hold their own gentle authority. It is a house shaped by intimacy rather than ceremony, belonging to a different cadence of royal life. While Balmoral carries the weight of tradition and national identity, Birkhall belongs to the realm of personal retreat, family memory, and the quieter side of royal existence. Approaching the house, one notices its restrained charm. Birkhall is not imposing or elaborate. Its architecture is rooted in the vernacular style of Scottish country homes, with stone walls, pitched roofs, and windows that frame the surrounding landscape as though they were part of it. The river nearby, always in motion but never hurried, provides a steady backdrop of sound. Pines rise close to the house, their branches shifting gently in the highland breeze, casting long shapes across the lawn. Here, nature does not surround the house, it embraces it. Birkhall carries deep emotional significance for the royal family. Purchased in the early 20th century, the house later became closely associated with the Queen Mother, whose fondness for the residence shaped its character long after her time. Photographs from earlier decades show her walking the grounds, tending to gardens, and enjoying the calm that Birkhall offered her. For her, this was a sanctuary where the formality of public life receded into a distant hum, replaced by the rhythms of the Scottish countryside. Generations grew up with Birkhall as a place of affection. The house holds memories of summers spent with siblings and cousins, of long afternoons exploring the woods, of shared meals where windows remained open to the scent of pine and river water. Even as the world beyond experienced decades of rapid change, Birkhall retained the stability of a home shaped more by continuity than reinvention. In more recent years, the residence became closely associated with personal milestones, periods of grief, reflection, and renewed companionship. It was here, in the early years of the 21st century, that quiet conversations unfolded, that private time could be spent walking the riverbanks, and that the landscape itself offered solace during times of loss. Birkhall, more than any other residence on the Balmoral estate, became the setting for deep personal transition. The house reflects this history in its interior spaces. Rooms are warm, with soft furnishings, well-loved objects, and collections that have accumulated naturally over decades. The fireplaces are central features, often lit during the cooler months, filling the house with the comforting scent of peat smoke. The furniture is arranged for living, not display. Books lie open on tables. Cushions bear the crease of recent use. The atmosphere is unmistakably that of a home rather than a formal residence. The gardens around Birkhall were developed with a sensitivity to the natural environment. They include sections of roses, soft borders, and older plantings that survive from earlier decades. Beyond the garden walls, the landscape stretches outward into the familiar terrain of the Balmoral estate. Rolling hills, deep forests, and the sound of stags moving across distant slopes. The residence sits at a meeting point between cultivated beauty and wild highland land, blending seamlessly with both. Dusk at Birkhall carries a tone unlike that of any other royal home. As the light fades, the river becomes a dark ribbon that moves steadily through the landscape. The hills surrounding the property shift into muted blues and grays, their outlines softening against the sky. Birds fall quiet, replaced by the faint rustle of branches as evening settles into its final calm. Inside the house, lamps are lit in slow succession, casting a warm glow against the gathering night. It is during this hour, when the day is nearly over but the night has not fully taken hold, that Birkhall reveals its most characteristic image. The house stands almost entirely dark from the outside, blending into the Highland dusk. Yet from one of the upper rooms, a single window glows faintly. The light is gentle, steady, and warm, forming a small, distinct square of brightness against the cooling air. It suggests reading, perhaps, or quiet thought at the end of the day. It signals life, but gently, unobtrusively, much in the way Birkhall itself embodies life behind the scenes of Monarchy, private rather than public, personal rather than ceremonial. That lone window shining through the dusk becomes a point of stillness. The light does not spread far, it rests within its frame, illuminating the interior while leaving the surrounding landscape undisturbed. It recalls the quiet continuity that Birkhall has offered for more than a century, a place where the most profound moments occur not in public, but in the quiet hours when only one lamp remains lit. Let us stand with that image now, the faint, steady glow of a single upstairs window at Birkhall, shining softly into the Highland evening. It will guide us gently into the next chapter of our journey, carrying the memory of one home into the story of another. The faint glow of the upstairs window at Birkhall lingers gently against the settling Highland dusk, its small square of light creating a quiet anchor amid the gathering shadows. As the last traces of day recede, the house becomes one with the deepening blue around it, its contours softened into silhouettes. Only that lone window remains discernible, a steady reminder that even within a landscape shaped by tradition, there are moments that belong solely to the quiet interior of a life, moments seen only by those who live them. The light does not flicker, it simply rests, unwavering as if holding the remaining warmth of the day in its hands. Eventually the night folds fully over Birkhall, and with respectful stillness, we turn south once again. The Highlands slip into memory, giving way to the long journey that leads back through Scotland's glens, across the borderlands, and into the expanses of northern England. Fields, towns, and ancient roads pass in steady succession as the landscape shifts gradually from rugged solitude to the gentler contours of the south. As hours pass, London's broad metropolitan region approaches once more, but our path bends away from the city's brightness toward an estate hidden within Surrey's rolling countryside. Here, beyond the crest of quiet lanes and deep woodland, stands Bagshot Park. The estate is expansive, its grounds stretching across a wide area that once formed an essential part of the Windsor estate's outer lands. Approaching the residence, one is struck not by the density of trees or the scale of open lawns, but by the particular stillness that begins to gather long before the house itself is in sight. The air grows quieter, the surrounding environment gentler, as if the estate holds its breath in anticipation of the visitor's arrival. Pathways wind through mature forests where branches arch above the road like a living cathedral. Sunlight and shadow play across the ground in patterns that shift with each passing cloud. At the heart of these grounds stands the main house, a sprawling late Victorian mansion whose scale is both unexpected and unmistakable. Bagshot Park is not a palatial structure built for ceremony, nor a country house designed solely for comfort. It is a unique hybrid, shaped by decades of adaptation and the varied purposes it has served. Built in the 19th century and significantly expanded in the early 20th, the house now stands as an imposing amalgamation of architectural forms: high gables, broad wings, and a footprint that speaks more to lived complexity than stylistic purity. From a distance, the building appears almost too large for its own setting, its many rooms suggested by the long run of windows facing the grounds. Its scale becomes fully clear only upon closer approach: 57 rooms, arranged across multiple floors and spanning several wings. The structure feels less like a single home and more like a cluster of interconnected spaces forming a small estate unto themselves. Historically, Bagshot Park served a multitude of roles. At different points, it housed members of the extended royal family, military officers, and individuals connected to the Crown's institutional responsibilities. Each era left its mark on the building, adding layers to its identity. After a fire in the early 20th century, the house was rebuilt with both practicality and grandeur in mind, creating the structure that stands today. When the estate entered the modern royal narrative, it did so quietly, through a long-term lease arranged with certain conditions of upkeep and use. The house became the residence of the Earl and Countess of Wessex, who settled into its substantial interior with their children and staff. Unlike smaller royal homes which seek intimacy and retreat, Bagshot Park's defining feature is its scale, a scale that creates both possibility and responsibility. Inside its many rooms, life unfolds in a manner shaped by the house's structure. Spacious corridors lead to formal rooms, working areas, private chambers, and sections adapted for domestic use. Some rooms retain decorative features from earlier decades: wooden paneling, high ceilings, and ornate fixtures, while others have been updated to reflect modern needs. The atmosphere inside is neither museum-like nor austere. Instead, the rooms carry the quiet mark of long-term residence, where family life and official duties intersect in measured balance. The grounds surrounding the house are equally expansive. Close to the residence, carefully tended gardens soften the structure's imposing presence. Farther away, the estate opens into woodland and lawn that blend seamlessly with the broader landscape. The calm of the grounds belies the sheer size of the property, creating an environment where the weight of the house contrasts gently with the openness of the natural setting. As day turns to evening over Bagshot Park, the light drifts slowly across the building's broad facade. The windows catch the last gleam of daylight, glowing briefly before dimming into uniform darkness. The trees surrounding the house take on deeper tones. Shadows gather beneath their branches. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls, its brief cry echoing lightly across the lawn before fading into the quiet. The estate becomes still, its many rooms silent as the night settles in. It is at this hour that Bagshot Park's scale becomes most evident. In the hush of evening, the structure's long outline stands in stark contrast to the calm landscape around it. The mansion forms a dark silhouette against the sky, its size unmistakable even without the detail provided by daylight. 57 rooms, stretching outward like a quiet reminder of the estate's unique place within the royal landscape. Yet there is something peaceful in this evening image, something that softens the enormity of the house and brings it into harmony with the night. The lawn rests in silence. The woodland edges hold their shadows patiently, and the mansion stands still, no longer imposing but simply present, a part of the long continuity of royal residences shaped by purpose, adaptation, and the quiet routines of those who live within. Let us pause here, resting for a moment within the hush that settles over Bagshot Park at the close of day. The silhouette of the 57-room mansion becomes our final image, a still, silent outline held gently by the surrounding night. From within that quiet, we will move onward, guided by the next residence waiting on our path. The hollow evening hush that settles around the 57-room silhouette of Bagshot Park stretches softly into the surrounding woodland. creating a stillness that feels both expansive and contained. The mansion stands quietly, its broad facade dim against the fading sky. One by one, the final traces of daylight withdraw from the upper windows, leaving only the faintest reflection of the evening behind. In the distance, the last birds settle into the cover of trees, their brief rustling swallowed by the depth of night. There is no urgency here, only the natural pause of a great house resting beneath the protective canopy of darkness. As we step away from that immense silhouette, the air seems to shift. The quiet becomes lighter, less dense. The landscape slowly opens, and our path bends westward into the gentle countryside of Gloucestershire. The terrain begins to change, from woodland enclosures to rolling fields and farmsteads, shaped by centuries of agricultural life. The sky widens above, unobstructed by towering trees or the heavy mass of Victorian walls. Here, the ground carries a different rhythm, one guided not by inherited architecture or historic formality, but by the steady cycle of rural work. It is within this landscape that we find Gatcombe Park. Set among more than 700 acres of farmland, paddocks, and woodland, Gatcombe stands as one of the quieter, royal residences. Its presence is modest compared to the sprawling structures of other estates. The house itself, a handsome Georgian manor built in the 18th century, sits with a calm, grounded confidence at the center of its land. Pale stone walls rise in clean, symmetrical lines, softened by ivy that climbs gently along the facade. Tall windows reflect the changing light of the countryside, from the cool grays of morning to the deep warmth of late summer afternoons. Approaching the house, one senses immediately that Gatcombe is shaped not by display, but by purpose. This is a working farm as much as it is a family home. Fields stretch outward on all sides, their patterns shifting with the seasons. Green in spring, golden in late summer, and soft brown during the quiet months of winter. Horses graze along the fences. Sheep move steadily across the hillsides. Cattle stand in close, thoughtful clusters beneath the shade of trees. The land breathes with the rhythm of agricultural life, and the house sits seamlessly within it. Gatcombe Park entered the royal family's story in the 1970s, and since then it has been closely linked with one figure whose devotion to work, service, and country life has become almost synonymous with her identity. For decades, this residence has served as the home of the Princess Royal, whose quiet dedication to duty has shaped the public's perception of her as one of the most industrious members of the family. Here, amid the pastoral calm of Gloucestershire, she found not only a home, but a place where her lifelong connection to horses, sport, and rural life could flourish in its natural environment. Inside the house, the rooms carry the understated warmth of long-term residence. Furniture is comfortable, arranged for living rather than display. Walls bear reminders of a life spent in constant motion. Photographs, mementos, objects accumulated over years of travel and service. There are no elaborate ceremonial rooms here. The interiors reflect a sense of practicality, shaped by the routines of a household anchored firmly in the real world rather than in the rituals of monarchy. The land surrounding Gatcombe is perhaps its most defining feature. The estate hosts equestrian competitions, agricultural fairs, and events that draw participants from across the country. These gatherings, held annually, turn parts of the estate into vibrant hubs of activity. Jumping courses set against the hills, crowds moving steadily along the paths, horses trotting in the distance. In these moments, Gatcombe becomes not only a private residence, but a place of shared tradition, where sport and community merge. Yet when those events pass and the fields return to their everyday quiet, the estate reveals its more enduring character. The mornings here begin with the soft sound of livestock stirring and the gentle ring of metal tools used in early chores. The smell of hay, grass, and damp soil rises naturally with the first light. Throughout the day, workers move across the land, checking fences, tending animals, repairing gates. Their presence is steady but unobtrusive, part of a rhythm that has shaped Gatcombe's life for generations. Evenings at Gatcombe carry a kind of simplicity that is rare among royal estates. As the sun lowers across the hills, long shadows stretch over the paddocks, birds settle into their roosts. The horses, gathered near their stables, stand in easy quiet, their outlines softened by the fading light. Inside the house, lamps glow warmly through the windows, casting steady light onto the lawn. As darkness deepens, the sounds of the estate begin to settle. Workers finish their tasks and close the structures that support daily life on the farm. Among these closing sounds is one that carries gently through the evening, the slow, rhythmic clink of a metal latch being secured on a stable door. It is not hurried or sharp. Instead, it has the measured tone of a familiar routine performed with care. The latch closes, the door settles, and the horses inside shift softly as they settle for the night. This small sound, a simple click of metal meeting wood, captures the essence of Gatcombe Park more clearly than any view of the house or description of the grounds. It is the sound of continuity, of work completed, of a residence defined not by spectacle, but by steady purpose. It carries none of the grandeur associated with palaces, yet it resonates with a quiet dignity, a reflection of the life lived here. Let us hold that sound for a moment. The gentle clink of the stable latch securing its place. It is modest, unassuming, and deeply rooted in the life of the estate. And from this soft closing of a door, we will move forward to the next residence awaiting us on this journey through the private and hidden corners of royal life. The slow, rhythmic clink of the metal latch closing on the stable door echoes lightly through the evening air at Gatcombe Park, settling into the quiet with the certainty of a final task completed. The horses shift softly behind the wooden door, their breath rising in gentle clouds that fade into the cool Gloucestershire night. Around the stable yard, the last traces of activity trail away as workers move toward their homes, their footsteps softened by the thick straw scattered across the ground. The estate, with its wide fields and steady routines, eases into darkness not through sudden stillness, but through the gradual cooling of movement, the natural way a working farm ends its day. We turn from that peaceful rhythm and begin once more across the countryside, leaving behind the faint smells of hay and soil, the tidy rows of hedgerow, and the calm silhouette of the Georgian house. Our path leads eastward again toward Berkshire, where the quiet farmlands of the Cotswolds slowly transition into the more formal grounds of the Windsor estate. The air grows cooler as we approach the great park, where ancient trees stand like sentinels along the winding roads and long avenues stretch outward into the dusk. Within this vast landscape lie several residences, some hidden deep among trees, others sitting quietly near the long water or tucked beyond sweeping lawns. Yet among these structures, one stands apart not because of its age or architectural merit, but because of the complicated history that has shaped its more recent years: Royal Lodge. Approaching Royal Lodge in the evening, one is struck by the peculiar stillness that surrounds it. The mansion, with its distinctive white exterior and broad facade, stands set within nearly 100 acres of grounds. Tall trees shield much of the house from view, their branches forming a thick canopy that obscures the structure at certain angles. Paths, lawns, and gardens spread outward in measured, well-manicured lines, a quiet reminder of the estate's long-standing connection to the crown. Royal Lodge has existed in many forms over the centuries. It began as a smaller house, used intermittently by the royal family and estate officials. Over time, additions and renovations transformed it into the substantial residence it became in the 20th century. Its most enduring association is with the Queen Mother, who made Royal Lodge her beloved Windsor home for over half a century. Her tenure imbued the house with warmth and gentle charm, reflected in the comfortable interiors and gardens designed for strolls rather than ceremony. Within its walls, generations gathered, holidays were spent, and quiet moments unfolded far from public view. The house served as a place of refuge during wartime, a home filled with memories of family life and a symbol of continuity in both joyful and difficult years. Visitors often spoke of its welcoming, lived-in atmosphere, an estate shaped more by affection than grandeur. Yet the decades that followed her passing marked a shift in the narrative surrounding Royal Lodge. After 2002, the property entered a long-term lease that allowed a new occupant to take residence. The house, once so closely tied to the Queen Mother's presence, took on a new chapter, one that would eventually draw intense public scrutiny. Its current occupant, though still connected by blood to the monarchy, lives in a situation unlike that of any other senior member of the family. Stripped of duties and titles, removed from public engagements, and caught within the aftermath of a significant legal settlement, he remains anchored to the house by a lease arranged during another era. Royal Lodge thus became the unlikely setting for a struggle between past assurances and present expectations. A quiet residence suddenly thrust into the center of a complex and uncomfortable story. Walking toward the estate in the evening reveals none of this tension directly. From the outside, Royal Lodge maintains its calm, its broad lawns and sweeping driveway appearing timeless in the fading light. Yet the silence feels unusually heavy, as though the house is aware of the attention directed toward it. The windows remain dark across much of the facade, their blankness amplifying the sense of isolation that now surrounds the property. It is often in twilight, when daylight slips away but full night has not quite settled, that Royal Lodge's atmosphere becomes most striking. The estate feels suspended, caught between its long, gentle history and the modern controversies that have altered its perception. The house stands firm. The trees whisper in the faint breeze, and the grounds hold their shape with the dignity of long tradition. But the silence around it does not resemble the peaceful quiet found at Gatcombe or Birkhall. It is sharper, heavier, marked by the knowledge that this residence now carries public questions rather than shared affection. As we continue our approach, one small detail breaks the darkness. A single security light positioned near the edge of the house flickers on. It casts a pale, circular glow onto the path, illuminating the stone border where the garden meets the drive. The light is functional rather than warm, revealing only what is necessary: a patch of path, the outline of nearby shrubs, and the faint suggestion of movement as a breeze brushes through the leaves. The glow feels strangely lonely, its cold whiteness standing in stark contrast to the deeper night settling across the estate. It hints at the presence of security, the responsibility that still accompanies all royal residences, yet also speaks subtly to the complicated circumstances in which the house now exists. Unlike the warm glow of Birkhall's upstairs window or the gentle light of Frogmore Cottage, this illumination carries no sense of domesticity. It is merely a marker of vigilance, a reminder that even in personal retreat, the house remains under watch. We pause here with that light, the faint, uneasy glow that shines across the edge of Royal Lodge, holding back the darkness by only a small radius. It does not reassure, it simply marks the line between house and night, past and present, expectation and reality. Let that image rest with us for a moment. From its quiet presence, we will move forward to the next residence, waiting beyond Windsor's shadow. The faint, uneasy glow of the security light at Royal Lodge lingers in the mind long after we leave the estate behind. As we move away from that isolated brightness, the surrounding darkness thickens, swallowing the narrow path and the contours of the trees until they become silhouettes against a deepening sky. The light sits far behind us now, a small reminder of a residence caught between privilege and uncertainty, anchored by history, yet weighed down by modern complexities. Ahead, the landscape stretches open once more, and the night begins to reshape itself into a calmer, broader silence. Crossing Windsor Great Park at dusk feels like stepping through a shifting corridor of time. The ancient oaks appear as they might have in centuries past, their wide trunks and spreading branches forming dark arches above the quiet paths. Deer move carefully through the grasslands, their shapes just visible in the last traces of twilight. The long water reflects a fading band of color, and the distant outline of Windsor Castle rises softly against the horizon, its towers muted by the dim light. From this vantage point, the royal properties scattered across the park seem like small islands in a sea of land, separate, enclosed, and bound by legacies that extend far beyond the present moment. Yet even as these estates differ in size and purpose, they share a common thread. Each one stands as a physical expression of monarchy, shaped by personal preference, historical inheritance, and a system that has evolved slowly across generations. Royal Lodge, with its challenges and controversies, is only one chapter within a larger narrative of residences that span the country and reflect the lives of those who have occupied them. Our journey now leads us to consider the broader structure behind these holdings, the mechanisms that sustain them, the finances that support them, and the long-standing traditions that define how they pass from one generation to the next. As we leave Windsor's wooded paths and move north along quieter roads, the countryside unfolds once more into open fields. The glow of street lamps grows more intermittent, and stretches of rural darkness fill the space between villages. Each mile brings us closer to the larger and more complex system that underpins the royal estates, a system not confined to any one residence, but woven through all of them. To understand the properties themselves, we must now look beyond the gates and gardens to the intricate structure that supports the monarchy's physical footprint. We begin with the sovereign grant. Introduced in its current form in 2012, it replaced older arrangements and created a more transparent, though still limited method of funding official royal duties. Each year, the grant provides the monarchy with a portion of the profits generated by the Crown Estate, which manages a vast portfolio including urban properties, farmland, forests, and substantial coastal holdings. This grant covers official expenses, staff at Buckingham Palace, travel for engagements, maintenance of public staterooms, and ceremonial functions that form part of Britain's constitutional life. But this grant does not tell the full story. Many royal residences, Sandringham, Balmoral, Birkhall, and others, are privately owned. Their upkeep does not appear in public accounts, and their staff, maintenance, and improvements are funded through private income sources. This distinction between public and private finances is often presented as clear and simple, yet in practice it is far more interwoven. Much of the private income comes from the duchies, the Duchy of Lancaster for the sovereign, and the Duchy of Cornwall for the Prince of Wales. These estates, despite being termed private, exist solely because of hereditary roles within the monarchy. They generate substantial revenue, benefit from unique tax arrangements, and pass between monarch and heir without inheritance tax. This structure makes the line between public cost and private wealth difficult to trace. Renovations to private residences often draw on duchy income, yet that income, while technically private, is tied to public office. Security costs for all occupied royal homes, public and private, fall to the Home Office, yet the details of those expenses remain undisclosed for national security reasons. Private estates remain private, but their financial foundations rest on systems built from public authority. It is this interdependence that often raises questions, especially when the number of properties appears so large and the overall cost so difficult to calculate. As the night deepens around our imagined route northward, we move now to consider how these properties pass from one generation to the next. Royal inheritances operate under unique rules. Under a 1993 agreement, transfers between sovereigns are exempt from inheritance tax, intended to preserve the monarchy's ability to function without diminishing its historical assets. As a result, properties like Sandringham and Balmoral, privately owned regardless of their royal associations, shift from monarch to monarch without the 40% tax that would apply to ordinary estates of similar scale. The effect of this policy is cumulative. Wealth passes intact across generations, growing with each transfer while never entering the tax system. For the royal family, this continuity preserves historical homes, personal residences, and the resources needed to support working life. For the public, however, it can appear as a reminder of the enduring nature of privilege, particularly during times of economic strain, when many face difficulties securing even a single home. The properties themselves are not merely buildings, but symbols of a system that allows them to be maintained without the financial pressures felt by ordinary citizens. We continue our journey through the night, and the rural road narrows before opening into another quiet stretch of landscape. The moon has risen above the fields, casting a pale light across the hedgerows. In the far distance, faint outlines of moorland begin to take shape, their sloping forms blending with the horizon. This shift in scenery offers a moment to reflect on the complexity of the royal property network. It is neither easily defined nor easily changed. Each estate carries its own history, its own purpose, its own ties to the individuals who call it home. Yet collectively, they form a structure whose scale is difficult to reconcile with the demands and expectations of modern society. As we watch the landscape around us empty into a wider, more open sweep of land, a new sound rises gently through the quiet. The faint rustle of tall grass moves along the edge of an unseen moorland path. It comes in soft waves, steady and persistent, brushing through the darkness as though guiding us forward. We pause with that sound, the whisper of grass bending in the night breeze, as it becomes our passage into the next part of this unfolding story. The soft, persistent rustle of wind moving through the tall grass at the edge of an unseen moorland path continues like a quiet invitation, drawing us farther across the landscape. The grass bends and sways, sweeping in long arcs that catch the dim moonlight, creating a slow rhythm beneath the open night sky. The air here feels wider, cooler, cleaner, unrestricted by the walls and gates that define so many of the royal residences we have visited. And yet the moorland is not as empty as it first appears. Its quiet is a threshold, a gentle pause before we turn toward the properties that bear the greatest symbolic weight of all. As we walk across that unseen path, the wind shifts, carrying with it a faint echo of something familiar, an undertone of stone, ceremony, and public expectation. These impressions lead our thoughts southward once more, toward the capital, where the monarchy's most visible properties stand not apart from society, but at its very center. The residences in London exist under constant attention, their gates passed by millions each year, their facades etched into the collective memory of the nation. Yet even these public icons bear layers of history and complexity that few ever truly see. We begin our return to the heart of London with a building known around the world, Buckingham Palace. From the moorland, the journey moves through small towns, past sleeping villages, and along long stretches of unlit road before the first signs of the city appear. At the edges of the metropolis, the glow of street lamps forms a warm haze over suburban houses, train lines, and quiet intersections. The hum of distant traffic gradually grows stronger, the landscape tightening into the familiar rhythm of urban life. And then, after many miles, the city opens into its grand, ceremonial spine, where the palace stands at the end of a broad avenue shaped for parades and national ritual. Seen at night, Buckingham Palace presents a very different face than the one known from news broadcasts or royal celebrations. The The wide facade, stretching across the edge of St. James's Park, appears almost solemn beneath the subdued lighting that washes gently across its stonework. The gilded gates glimmer faintly, the forecourt lies empty, and the statues along the Victoria Memorial stand still against the quiet air. In these hours, when crowds have dispersed and the city's noise softens, the palace becomes less a symbol of spectacle and more a reminder of its long, complicated role in British life. Buckingham Palace is not merely a residence, it is the working heart of the monarchy. Within its walls, hundreds of staff maintain a constant cycle of activity, administration, diplomacy, planning, and coordination that supports the institution's public responsibilities. For most people, the palace represents the monarchy's most visible face, a place where ceremonies unfold across the centuries. Investitures, garden parties, state visits, and national moments of mourning or celebration. And yet, despite this visibility, much of what happens inside remains known only to those who live and work within. The palace contains over 700 rooms, though only a small portion of these are ever seen by the public. The staterooms, opened seasonally for tours, reveal a carefully curated vision of royal heritage: chandeliers, gilded ceilings, portraits, and polished floors that reflect a continuity of tradition. Beyond those rooms lie the private apartments, offices, kitchens, service corridors, archives, and workshops that form the daily machinery of royal life. It is a world shaped by precision and protocol, operating far from the crowds that gather at the gates. Yet, despite its grandeur, Buckingham Palace carries a deep burden. Its age and scale make its maintenance a constant challenge. The vast renovation plan currently underway, 10 years of rewiring, replumbing, and restoration, reflects the complex responsibility of preserving a structure that serves both as a national symbol and a functioning residence. Some critics question the expense, while others view the work as necessary stewardship. The palace stands at the center of these debates, both literally and figuratively, its walls absorbing the pressures of a changing society. As we linger outside in the quiet of the night, another truth emerges. For the monarch, Buckingham Palace is less a home than an office. Its grandeur, its ceremonial significance, and its central location all define it not as a retreat, but as a stage. Personal comfort often yields to duty within these walls. The palace has witnessed moments of profound joy and profound sorrow, yet its scale creates a distance that can feel as empty as it is impressive. Many members of the royal family have preferred smaller private residences, seeking warmth and familiarity elsewhere, while maintaining the palace as the institutional center. From here, we travel a short distance across the mall to St. James's Palace, one of the oldest surviving royal residences in London. Built in the 16th century, its red brick exterior and Tudor architecture stand in contrast to the classical facade of Buckingham Palace. St. James's holds historical weight as the senior royal palace, once the main residence of monarchs and still the site of important ceremonies, including the proclamation of accession. Its courtyards, chapels, and apartments form a quieter, more secluded complex, known well to historians but rarely seen by the public. Nearby lies Clarence House, a more modest residence that has served successive heirs to the throne. Its cream-colored exterior and understated design reflect a balance between formality and comfort. It has been home to many royal figures, including the Queen Mother in her later years, and more recently, the then Prince of Wales. Each residence, though only steps apart, serves a different purpose, contributing to the intricate network of properties that support the modern monarchy. As we contemplate these London residences, each with its own history, symbolism, and role, it becomes clear that they form a three-layered picture of monarchy in the capital. Buckingham Palace stands for public duty, St. James's for historical authority, and Clarence House for family continuity. Together, they embody the mixture of tradition and adaptation that defines the institution. Yet despite their proximity, each residence is bound by its own atmosphere. Buckingham Palace feels vast and ceremonial. St. James's Palace carries the weight of centuries. Clarence House maintains a quiet domesticity. This contrast reveals something fundamental about the monarchy. Its homes are not uniform expressions of privilege, but varied reflections of roles, public, historical, and personal, that weave together to sustain an ancient institution in a modern world. As we step back from these buildings, the city around us begins to settle deeper into the night. The lights in the palace windows reduce to a sparse pattern across the facade. Traffic noise recedes. The breeze passing through the trees in nearby Green Park grows softer. And then, from within the palace, somewhere deep inside its long corridors, a single sound rises gently into the night. The distant chime of a clock echoes through the building, resonating faintly across the quiet forecourt. It is with that steady, measured chime, marking time in a house defined by centuries, that we move onward to the next part of our story. The distant chime of the clock echoes through the long corridors of Buckingham Palace, its soft, measured notes drifting through layers of stone and silence. Each tone feels deliberate, almost ceremonial, marking the passage of time in a place where centuries overlap and where history settles not only in the public rooms, but in every hallway, stair, and quiet landing. As the final chime fades into stillness, the palace returns once more to its nocturnal rhythm, a slow, steady heartbeat within the vast machinery of the city. We step away from the shadowed forecourt and begin our journey north and west through London's sleeping streets. Traffic has eased, and the pavements glisten faintly under street lamps as though carrying the remnants of an earlier reign. The buildings along the mall give way to tree-lined avenues and quiet squares, where the faint hum of the city settles into a softer register. Even in the capital, the night has a way of reshaping familiar places, smoothing their edges and revealing details overlooked in daylight. As we move toward Hyde Park, the city opens briefly into a wide expanse of darkened grass and distant trees. The lake lies still, reflecting the faint glow of the surrounding hotels and apartments. Beyond the park's edge, framed by rows of historic houses, stands the next major residence in our journey, Kensington Palace. Its presence is both understated and unmistakable, a red brick structure carrying centuries of personal stories, some celebrated, others marked by sorrow, woven into its long and complex history. Kensington Palace differs from Buckingham Palace in tone and purpose. Where Buckingham serves as the ceremonial and administrative heart of the monarchy, Kensington has long been a domestic residence shaped by quieter rhythms and more intimate routines. Its origins lie in the 17th century, when it was acquired by King William III and Queen Mary II as a retreat from the damp air of Whitehall. Over the centuries, successive monarchs expanded and altered it, creating a residence that, while less formal than Buckingham, remains deeply tied to the royal family's private lives. Passing through the gates at night, the palace appears serene. The long facade is softened by darkness, illuminated only by a few discreet lamps near the entrance. The windows, many of them unlit, form a grid of pale rectangles against the deep red brick. In daytime, visitors walk through the public exhibitions and gardens, tracing the lives of former residents such as Queen Victoria, who grew up here, or Princess Diana, whose presence still echoes through certain rooms. But at night, the palace feels entirely different. Quieter, more reflective, as though holding its stories close and waiting for dawn before releasing them again. Within Kensington Palace, a complex network of apartments stretches laterally across the building. Some are modest by royal standards. Others are surprisingly grand, designed to accommodate families, hosting spaces, and working offices. Over the years, these apartments have housed many generations of royals, princes, princesses, and cousins, whose roles varied from central to peripheral within the institution. The palace has seen births, childhoods, marriages, separations, and countless personal moments too private ever to be recorded publicly. Its corridors carry the gentle wear of family life, even as the structure itself retains its status as a royal household. One of the most significant apartments in recent history has been the home of the Prince and Princess of Wales during their earlier years of marriage. Their official London residence, situated deep within one of the palace wings, became a place where young children played, where staff worked unobtrusively, and where daily life unfolded in the midst of heavy public scrutiny. Photographs released occasionally showed glimpses of warm, lived-in rooms, soft furnishings, family pictures, and spaces arranged for comfort rather than grandeur. These fleeting views reminded the public that behind the ceremony and formality lay a family navigating the same challenges faced by any household raising children, albeit on a far larger and more scrutinized stage. Yet Kensington Palace also serves an administrative function. Offices for various royal foundations and charities have long been located here, creating an unusual blend of domestic life and public service under one roof. Staff members pass through the same courtyards used by residents, their movements crossing the private boundaries carefully maintained for the families who live within. This layered existence, public and private coexisting side by side, has defined Kensington for decades. As we move farther into the night, the palace grounds grow quieter. The gardens, meticulously maintained, stretch outward into darkness. By day, they host thousands of visitors strolling along the formal walkways or pausing near the statue of Diana, Princess of Wales. At night, however, the gardens take on the stillness found in historic estates closed to the world, their fountains silent and their hedges untouched by any passing footsteps. The atmosphere feels contemplative, as though the palace itself rests, gathering strength from the quiet hours before morning returns. Beyond the gardens, the surrounding neighborhood holds its own significance. Kensington remains one of London's most affluent districts, filled with embassies, museums, and homes whose facades reflect centuries of layered history. Yet, for all this grandeur, the palace remains the anchor at its heart, a reminder of Britain's royal lineage embedded within the modern city. The contrast between the palace's centuries-old bricks and the contemporary bustle beyond its walls illustrates the tension inherent in monarchy itself, an institution rooted in tradition yet constantly required to adapt. As we observe the palace in this quiet hour, a sense of continuity emerges. Kensington has been home to many who shaped Britain's story, figures who balanced public duty with private life within these very walls. Their experiences, though separated by time, reveal a shared thread. The palace offers sanctuary, but never complete separation from the responsibilities that accompany royal roles. Even in its most domestic corners, Kensington cannot entirely escape the expectations placed upon its residents. Standing before the long facade, we look for signs of life within the darkened windows. Occasionally, a single light glows faintly in an upper room, revealing a fragment of activity, a late night in a study, a staff member completing a task, a moment of quiet reflection. These isolated lights hold a sense of human presence, reminding us that behind the symmetry of the architecture, real lives continue in rhythms unseen by the outside world. It is within this layered quiet, public history on the outside, private life within, that our next transition begins to take form. As we move slowly away from the palace, leaving its long walls behind us, a sound rises gently from somewhere deep within the building. It is subtle at first, almost easy to overlook, but then it becomes just audible enough to capture the imagination. A quiet creak of a wooden door opening echoes faintly through the interior corridors. We follow that soft sound as it guides us toward the next chapter of our journey. The quiet creak of the wooden door opening somewhere deep within Kensington Palace lingers in the still air, as faint as a memory slipping into consciousness. It is a sound that suggests movement within the private quarters, an unseen presence navigating the long corridors that stretch beneath the calm exterior of the building. For a moment, the palace feels almost alive, as though acknowledging its own layered history through the subtle shifting of its doors, floors, and timbers, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. We step away from Kensington Palace and follow the faint echo of that creaking door into the night beyond. The city around us rests under a blanket of late-hour softness. Street lamps cast long pools of amber light across the pavements, and the buildings near the palace stand in rows of dignified quiet. As we move eastward, the residential streets widen into more formal avenues, guiding us gradually toward another of London's important royal residences, one that, while less publicly visible, plays a vital role within the system that supports the monarchy. This residence is Clarence House, situated just a short walk from Buckingham Palace. Built in the early 19th century, its pale facade and understated architecture reflect a sense of cultivated restraint. Clarence House has served as home to several generations of royals, each of whom shaped its atmosphere in their own way. While grand in scale compared to ordinary houses, it lacks the imposing formality of the palaces around it. The building feels more like a stately home than a royal stronghold, a place of work and residence balanced carefully between tradition and comfort. As we approach Clarence House in the quiet hours of the night, the building's silhouette emerges gently from the surrounding darkness. A few lamps cast soft light across the courtyard, revealing the contours of its arched windows and the calm symmetry of its design. Unlike Buckingham Palace, which maintains a sense of ceremonial gravity even at night, Clarence House appears almost understated, its stillness reflecting the personal lives that have unfolded within its walls. For decades, Clarence House was closely associated with the Queen Mother, who lived here from 1953 until her passing in 2002. Her presence shaped not only the atmosphere of the building, but also its role within the royal network. The rooms were known for their warmth, decorated in her preferred style of comfortable, inviting interiors that harmonized with the house's Georgian character. Visitors often remarked on the sense of welcome that infused the residence, a feeling of domestic familiarity set against a backdrop of historical significance. After her, the then Prince of Wales made Clarence House his London residence. Under his stewardship, the house continued to serve both domestic and official functions. Offices for charitable foundations operated just steps away from private rooms where family life unfolded with measured discretion. The blend of public service and personal refuge within the same structure mirrored the dual responsibilities of those who lived here, a theme echoed across many royal homes. At night, Clarence House reveals its most contemplative character. The gardens, though modest in size compared to larger estates, rest in quiet harmony. Tended with care, they form a green barrier between the house and the busy roads just beyond the walls. Trees rustle softly in the darkness, and the faint scent of late-season flowers drifts through the cool air. From the outside, passers-by might see nothing more than a historical building preserved for official use. Yet within its walls lies a rhythm shaped by generations whose lives intertwined with the monarchy's evolving story. But Clarence House is not merely a residence. It is part of a symbolic triangle within London's royal geography, linked to Buckingham Palace and St. James's Palace through both proximity and function. Together, these buildings represent continuity, past, present, and future, each standing as a touchstone for a different dimension of royal duty. Buckingham Palace reflects public ceremony. St. James's holds centuries of precedence. Clarence House anchors the personal and administrative day-to-day life of senior royals. These roles overlap and shift over time, yet the buildings remain at the core of the institution's presence in the capital. As dawn still lies far away, the quiet around Clarence House deepens. One or two faint lights burn within upper windows, suggesting the gentle hum of nighttime work or the presence of a staff member completing final tasks. Most rooms remain dark, settled into the kind of silence that older houses naturally carry after generations of occupation. The thick walls absorb the night sounds, creating an atmosphere of thoughtful calm in which time seems to slow. From here, our journey turns toward another property deeply embedded in the monarchy's working life, St. James's Palace. Only steps away, it stands in near shadow, its Tudor brickwork darkened by the night. The palace, once the primary residence of monarchs, has long served as a place where tradition anchors the institution. Its courtyards and chambers hold centuries of diplomatic gatherings, royal births, and constitutional declarations. Even in the quietest hours, St. James's feels dense with history, its architecture offering a powerful reminder of the crown's enduring lineage. Yet our focus tonight is not the ancient brick of St. James's, nor the soft-lit windows of Clarence House, but the gradual shift in atmosphere as we move from one residence to another. These buildings, though physically close, contain markedly different energies. Kensington Palace carries the tone of family life, shaped by childhoods and domestic routines. Clarence House embodies a quieter dignity, tempered by decades of charitable work and personal residence. St. James's Palace, though still important, now stands as a guardian of tradition rather than a primary home. It is this interplay between roles, public, historical, domestic, that defines London's royal properties more than any single building's grandeur. Each plays its part within a system carefully balanced between visibility and seclusion, tradition and adaptation, and each contributes to the larger story of a monarchy that often appears unified from the outside, but upon closer examination reveals layers of complexity built steadily over generations. As we leave Clarence House behind and drift once more into the subdued night of central London, the streets feel unusually hushed. The city, though vast, seems momentarily simplified to a scattering of light, shadow, and quiet movement. Our path now leads north again, past the final borders of royal London, toward properties lying far from the capital's constant hum. The night air shifts. Somewhere in the distance, the sound changes, subtle at first, then progressively clearer. A firm, muted thud echoes across the quiet, as though heavy boots have stepped onto a stone threshold. It is a sound that belongs not to these London streets, but to places older, more remote, shaped by wind and open land. We follow that sound northward into the next chapter of our journey. The muted thud of heavy boots stepping onto a stone threshold somewhere far to the north settles into the cold air like a quiet announcement. It is the sort of sound that belongs to remote houses and old estates, places where the land stretches outward in great unbroken distances, and where buildings stand as interruptions in a landscape shaped more by nature than by human presence. The footstep is steady, deliberate, and slightly hollow, echoing faintly against the thick walls that guard such residences against wind and weather. In that solitary sound lies the quiet resilience of northern homes that have endured decades, even centuries, of isolation. We move toward that threshold now, journeying northward across Britain, leaving behind London's lights and the densely woven fabric of urban life. As the miles slip past, the land changes shape. Cities become towns, towns become villages, and the villages thin into clusters of houses separated by wide fields. The sky grows deeper, more expansive, revealing layers of shifting cloud that move steadily across the horizon. The wind strengthens as we climb into open country, carrying with it the distinct scent of heather, peat, and distant rain. The journey is long, but it prepares us for the atmosphere that defines the next residence in our exploration, a place both private and significant, deeply rooted in the personal life of the king. That residence is Birkhall. Tucked within the grounds of the Balmoral estate, Birkhall occupies a quieter role compared to its grander counterpart. Where Balmoral Castle stands as a symbol of Scottish identity within the monarchy, Birkhall feels more intimate, more personal, a place shaped not by ceremony but by preference and familiarity. It is here that the king has often chosen to retreat, away from the weight of public expectation, finding comfort in a landscape that reflects his long-standing connection to nature, conservation, and rural life. Approaching Burke Hall at night, we find the house partially obscured by tall trees. Their branches sway and murmur in the wind, forming a protective canopy that shields the residents from view. A modest cluster of lights glows near the entrance, offering brief glimpses of white walls and stone chimneys. Compared to the vast, imposing structure of Balmoral Castle, Burke Hall feels almost understated, its scale closer to that of a large family home rather than a royal estate. Yet its history is no less meaningful. It once belonged to the Queen Mother, who loved the house deeply and whose presence still seems to linger in the quiet corners of the garden and the calm arrangement of its rooms. As we pass through the surrounding grounds, the air carries the scent of pine and damp soil. Paths weave through patches of woodland, crossing small streams and brushing the edges of meadows where deer often wander at dawn. These natural features have long defined the atmosphere of Burke Hall, reinforcing its identity as a place of retreat. Unlike the ceremonial responsibilities that accompany stays at Balmoral Castle, life at Burke Hall is slower, gentler, grounded in the rhythms of the land itself. The house is used for reading, walking, writing, and reflection, quiet pursuits that contrast with the demands of public duty. The interior of Burke Hall, though rarely photographed, is known to be warm and traditional. Rooms are furnished with comfortable chairs, patterned textiles, and personal objects accumulated through decades. Framed photographs of family members, landscapes, and historical moments fill shelves and tabletops. The decor bears layers of inheritance, from the Queen Mother's tastes to the King's long-standing interest in craftsmanship and natural materials. This blending of eras creates a homely atmosphere, one that feels lived in rather than curated. Yet for all its comfort, Burke Hall reflects more than personal preference. It represents the place where the king finds continuity through change. Here he has weathered periods of public scrutiny, familial transition, and the shifting responsibilities that have shaped his life. The house served as a location for private holidays, important conversations, and moments of quiet planning before significant events. It is where he returned after the passing of his parents, and where he often begins periods of seasonal work on environmental projects, initiatives that have defined much of his public identity. As we linger near the entrance, the muted thud that opened our journey here feels newly meaningful. It evokes the sound of arrival, of someone crossing the threshold into a place of personal refuge. For many members of the royal family, privately owned homes serve as emotional anchors, spaces where they can step back from their public roles and reconnect with familiar routines. Burke Hall epitomizes this function. It provides not only shelter, but grounding, a reminder of continuity amidst the rapid changes that accompany royal life. Beyond the house, the landscape contributes its own significance. The River Muick flows nearby, winding past areas of dense forest and open hillside. The surrounding land supports wildlife, forestry, and traditional estate activities, all of which create an environment deeply connected to the king's interests. The natural world here is not ornamental, but integral, shaping daily life and offering a sense of purpose beyond the formalities of monarchy. Writers, visitors, and local residents often remark on the tranquility of the region, describing it as a place where time seems to move differently, more slowly, more thoughtfully. Despite its quiet nature, Burke Hall is part of a larger system. Its privacy is maintained by the vast buffer of the Balmoral estate, its comfort supported by the staff who care for both the house and the surrounding land. While the public sees little of this work, the ongoing care and maintenance of these properties require considerable coordination. Burke Hall may appear as a simple retreat, but it is also a carefully maintained asset within the wider royal network, functioning both as personal home and as part of a legacy bound to Scotland's cultural and political landscape. As the night grows darker and the wind settles into a steady whisper across the hillside, we step back into the open air beyond the house. The sky above the cairngorms is vast, dotted faintly with stars flickering between drifting clouds. The land feels endless, stretching outward in undulating folds of moor and forest. In the distance, a soft glow appears, faint and low to the ground, as though hovering just above the mist that clings to the open moor. It is the glow of a single lantern, shining dimly across the highland night. We watch that distant light shimmer through the shifting mist. It becomes our passage to the next part of this story, another step deeper into the network of homes that shaped the modern monarchy. The distant lantern glowing across an open stretch of highland mist flickers softly, its pale light pulsing in and out of view as the fog drifts in slow, deliberate waves. For a moment, it feels as though the lantern is guiding us, drawing a thin line through the darkness, leading us across the open landscape toward the next property in our journey. The mist thickens and thins around it, forming delicate curtains of gray that move like breath across the moor. Each shift reveals a little more of the rolling land, the scattered rocks, and the faint outline of a narrow path disappearing into the night. As we follow the lantern's glow, the air grows cooler and carries the subtle scent of heather and damp stone. The ground beneath our feet softens into peat, absorbing sound and leaving only the hush of our movement behind. It is a landscape that holds its history quietly, shaped by centuries of wind, water, and the enduring presence of those who have lived within its bounds. These hills have watched generations pass, each leaving only the faintest mark upon a land too wide, too ancient, and too patient to be altered easily. Gradually, the lantern's glow draws us toward another royal property, one smaller and more humble than Balmoral Castle or Birkhall, yet equally woven into the family's private lives. This place is not steeped in ceremony, nor used for grand gatherings. Instead, it represents a kind of simplicity rarely associated with royal estates. It is a property used occasionally, almost quietly, by members of the family seeking a modest retreat in the Highlands. Though not as widely known, it contributes to the wider picture of the monarchy's intimate relationship with Scotland's rugged landscape. This property is Delnadamph Lodge. Hidden deep within the Cairngorm foothills, Delnadamph sits far from the more frequented parts of the Balmoral estate. Its appearance is unassuming, a stone house set among rolling hills, surrounded by scrubland and sparse woodland, with only the distant sound of the river and the constant presence of the wind breaking the silence. The house has seen various uses over the years, from accommodation for estate workers to a potential renovation project once considered by younger members of the family. Although plans shifted and the building was never fully transformed, its presence remains a quiet testament to the monarchy's historical footprint across the Highlands. Approaching Delnadamph at night feels like stepping into a story paused long ago. The house stands dark, with only the faintest glimmer of light in a small window facing the moor. Its roof line cuts a simple silhouette against the clouds drifting overhead. Weathered stone walls hold the memory of winters that brought deep snows and summers, marked by the gentle hum of insects moving through the grass. The air carries a freshness that feels almost untouched by time, and the ground around the house bears the subtle indentations of deer, who wander freely across the land. Although the house remains largely unused today, its surrounding landscape tells a story of continuity. The monarchy's connection to Scotland is not limited to the grand image of Balmoral or the well-trodden paths of the castle grounds. It stretches across remote hillsides, forgotten lodges, and quiet stretches of countryside that reflect the country's deep, rugged beauty. These lands offer solitude and reflection, qualities that many members of the family have valued throughout their lives, especially those seeking distance from public attention. Leaving Delnadamph behind, we follow the lantern's faint glow once more as it moves gently through the mist. The air becomes thicker as we approach the edges of the cairngorms. The land stretches outward into darker shapes, where hills rise in soft gradients and valleys hold pools of shadow. In the far distance, faint lights mark the boundaries of small villages that lie at the foot of the mountains, quiet communities that have coexisted for generations with the vast royal estates surrounding them. As we continue, the path turns slightly, guiding us deeper into the fabric of Scotland's royal landscape. We pass working farmland, patches of forest, and riverbeds worn smooth by decades of running water. Every element here feels timeless. Even the wind, persistent and unchanging, seems to carry fragments of old stories, snatches of memory from the years when the royal family first established their presence in this region. Queen Victoria's fascination with the Highlands shaped much of what the estate would become, turning remote land into private royal territory and embedding Scotland into the monarchy's identity in a way that continues today. Beyond Delnadamp and Birkhall, the Balmoral estate includes numerous cottages and smaller buildings, each serving a purpose within the estate's work. Gamekeepers' residences, forestry shelters, and historic outbuildings blend into the land with quiet modesty. They remind us that many royal properties, though privately owned, function as living estates. They support agriculture, conservation, and rural livelihoods, not as ornamental symbols, but as working landscapes with their own rhythms. These understated buildings do not carry the grandeur often associated with royalty, yet they reveal another dimension of the property network, its scale, its complexity, and its deep connection to the land it encompasses. The lantern ahead begins to dim as the mist thickens once more. The path beneath us rises gently, carrying us toward a vantage point overlooking the distant lights of the valley. From here, the landscape appears almost dreamlike. Patches of moonlight break through the cloud cover, casting silvery highlights across the moors and revealing the faint outlines of rocky ridges. The stillness feels profound, as though we are witnessing a moment untouched by the outside world. As we stand upon this ridge, looking out over land shaped by centuries of weather and royal presence, the lantern flickers one final time before dissolving into the fog. Its disappearance marks the end of our passage through Scotland's northern estates, a landscape that holds both the grandeur of Balmoral and the quiet simplicity of Delnadamp. Together, these properties illustrate the depth and variety of the monarchy's holdings, extending from polished palaces to forgotten lodges across remote hills. The wind softens now, and the mist curls gently along the ground, revealing just enough of a dark stone path to guide us onward. From somewhere beyond the ridge, subtle, patient, and distant, a sound emerges. It is barely audible at first, like a small hand tapping softly against wood. Then it becomes clearer, echoing through the quiet as though rising from an unseen corridor within an old house. A soft, measured knock, an invitation toward our final reflection. The soft, measured knock echoing through an unseen corridor lingers in the stillness like a quiet summons, as though some distant room has opened itself just long enough to invite our final reflection. The sound is patient, unhurried, and it settles into the air with a sense of calm inevitability. It is the kind of knock that suggests both an ending and an opening, a reminder that every journey, no matter how vast in scale, narrowly concludes in the same way, with a moment of pause before stepping across an unseen threshold. We move toward that echo now, following its faint resonance through the last stretch of our long passage across royal landscapes. As we do, the world around us grows softer, more subdued. The distant hills fade into silhouettes, the roads behind us blur into memory, and the many estates, grand, modest, concealed, or celebrated, gather themselves into a single tapestry. Each residence we have visited stands at its own distance, each carrying its own story, each representing a different facet of monarchy. And yet, within this final part, All of them draw together, revealing a wider portrait of an institution defined as much by land and memory as by ceremony and tradition. The knock grows quieter as we drift through this last corridor, and soon the houses we have walked through, Buckingham Palace with its formal corridors, Kensington Palace with its domestic calm, Balmoral with its rugged quiet, Birk Hall with its personal warmth, feel like rooms within the same vast structure. The corridors between them lengthen and narrow until they resemble a single path, worn by time, shaped by footsteps from generations of individuals who lived their lives not only in public view, but within these private spaces the public rarely sees. As we follow this path, the properties begin to settle into their broader context. They are not isolated chapters, but components of a larger system built across centuries. Some of these residences began as gifts from monarchs to their families. Others emerged from political relationships, strategic alliances, or simple personal preference. Many evolved through adaptation, rooms added, wings expanded, gardens reshaped, until they formed the network of royal homes we recognize today. And yet, behind this network lies a truth seldom acknowledged directly. Royal houses are more than bricks and stone, more than architectural heritage or symbols of continuity. They are physical expressions of privilege shaped across history. Assets that pass from reign to reign, immune to the pressures that shape the private homes of ordinary people. They endure because tradition insists upon it. They remain because the institution requires them. They persist because each generation inherits not only responsibility, but also the physical weight of these properties. In the quiet of this final passage, we begin to sense how heavy that inheritance truly is. The many homes we have explored, Sandringham with its wide farmlands, Balmoral with its 1,000 hills, Clarence House with its gentle domesticity, the minor cottages tucked across Scottish moorland, form an empire of land and legacy. Some are familiar to the public, others remain deeply private. Some invite visitors for a few summer months, others have never opened a single room. Some generate income through tourism or agriculture, others rest quietly, maintained by mechanisms largely unseen. This network of estates represents continuity, stability, and history, yet it also reflects the contradictions that define the monarchy in the 21st century. The properties are cherished, yet controversial, traditional, yet difficult to justify, historically significant, yet increasingly out of step with the realities of modern life. For many who observe these estates from afar, they stand as symbols of beauty and heritage. For others, they raise questions about fairness, transparency, and the responsibilities of privilege within a changing society. Still, within the walls of each residence, human stories unfold with the same quiet rhythms found in households everywhere. Families gather at Christmas, footsteps cross hallways late at night, letters are written from small wooden desks, familiar landscapes offer comfort during difficult periods, and the wind, whether sweeping across the Norfolk fields or the Highland hills, continues its steady work of softening edges and carrying voices toward the horizon. We continue down the corridor shaped by that lingering knock, and the path broadens into an open space, neither a room nor a landscape, but something between the two. Here, the properties appear as impressions, windows lit against darkness, silhouettes of towers and chimneys, the distant outline of a cottage set against rising hills. They drift in and out of view, like memories settling gently into place. The atmosphere feels calm, reflective, as though the homes themselves are resting after centuries of bearing witness to private joys and public pressures. In this final gathering of images, one question rises with particular clarity, not a question of scandal or blame, nor a demand for reform or justification, but a quieter, more contemplative question. What does it mean for a modern nation to inherit the physical footprint of centuries? The answer is neither simple nor singular. It lies partly in history, how these properties came to be, why they mattered, how they shaped the lives of those who lived within them. It lies partly in the present, how they function today, what they cost, and how they influence the way the public views the institution. And it lies partly in the future, how the next generations will interpret them, preserve them, alter them, or perhaps one day release them into a different form of national story. For now, the properties remain as they are, guarded, cherished, complex, and deeply woven into the identity of the crown. Their halls will continue to echo with the footsteps of those who carry the responsibilities of public life. Their windows will continue to light up in the evenings, revealing fragments of private routine. Their grounds will continue to stretch across fields, forests, and hills that have long outlived their original purpose. And the paths between them will continue to reflect the enduring tension between tradition and modernity. The soft knock that brought us here fades at last, absorbed by the stillness of this final space. In its place comes a long, steady quiet, a moment of rest at the end of our journey. The corridor dissolves, the mist lifts, and the many properties slip gently back into their landscapes. Only the calm remains, and with it the sense that we have walked through a world normally hidden, moving slowly through the layers of history, responsibility, and quiet human presence that shape the royal homes of Britain. In this closing silence, the story settles like dusk across a distant estate. The door closes softly. The night draws in, and the journey ends, not with proclamation, but with a quiet breath returning to the land.